Hi, my name is Jazzie, and today I'm going to be talking about recovery from psychological trauma. Typically, we associate psychological trauma with men a part of wars, but there are many events that could cause distress and put an emotional strain on someone's life. Psychological trauma is when the ability to cope is overwhelmed by a massive amount of stress. These events can range from death of a loved one, diagnosis of a life-threatening health condition, some type of abuse, etc. Trauma is not defined by the event that takes place, but by how it affects the individual, meaning that trauma is very unique to each person that experiences it. Trauma actually comes from the way that our brains are structured. Our brains are composed of three main parts: the cortex, the limbic system, and the brainstem. The cortex is responsible for our thoughts and actions, the limbic system is our emotion center, and the brainstem is the communicating part of our brain that controls our body functions. Traumatic events can actually alter the structure of our brains, and there have been scans to show that brains affected by developmental problems are very similar to those who suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD. There are many factors that play into vulnerability of experiencing trauma, one being if the event took place during childhood. Childhood trauma is when someone or something disrupts the sense of safety and security in the child, leaving them with the feeling that the world is unsafe. These effects can be long-lasting and carry over into adulthood if they're not properly treated. There are also many symptoms that come along with psychological trauma, such as affecting sleeping or eating habits, panic attacks, depression, anxiety, irritability, lack of concentration, flashbacks, and many more. These symptoms can be short-term or long-term, but regardless of the amount of time the symptoms last, each victim will be left with triggers that remind them of the traumatic event. These triggers can be brought on by a variety of things, such as sound, scent, or even the anniversary. For the recovery process, some won't necessarily need an extensive one because they're able to bounce back fast and at most will just need support from their family and friends. But for many, they'll have a difficult time adjusting to life and it can actually end up debilitating them. Everyone's timeline for recovery is very different, but there comes a point in time where if the symptoms are not subsiding, it's time to seek professional help. Recovery process is the main goal when it comes to dealing with trauma, but it could be a very tough thing because the victim could be re-traumatized. There are many therapists trained for cases like this, but it's also very important for the victim to have a really good relationship with their therapist in order to feel safe. Because throughout their process, they're going to have to relive their horrific events. This is all in order to prevent from them resurfacing at a later time. The reason why I chose this topic is because I am currently recovering from psychological trauma. My recovery process has been a long journey that has been going on for the past 5 years. From 6th to 7th grade, I experienced trauma, and it completely changed my life in all ways. When I was younger, I was very outgoing. I loved to be the center of attention, make new friends, I liked to perform for my family, and I wasn't afraid of anything. And I was the kid that never knew when to stop talking. And every single morning, I woke up with a smile on my face. But by the end of 7th grade, I went through a big change. I became very reserved, I had a hard time with new friends, I lost all my confidence, didn't want to talk to anyone, and I started to pull away from my family. Of course, at this age, I didn't know I was dealing with trauma, but even more than that, I was dealing with grief as well. As we all know, there are 5 stages of grief. There's denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. The first stage was denial, and I went through years of this. It all started in 8th grade when I began to start coping with my trauma. From 8th to 10th grade, I did counseling off and on, and I hated every single part of it, and I never took it seriously. I felt like I wasn't helping because they were only prying into my business and trying to make me relive horrible events that I worked so hard to forget. I didn't want to talk about it because I actually convinced myself that nothing ever happened and I was completely okay. The next stage was anger, and this was mostly towards myself and my parents. I went through a period of time where I hated myself completely because I thought I was a complete failure, and I thought I was a major embarrassment to my family and pretty much everyone around me. Next, I had anger towards my dad. When I was about 8 or 9 years old, my parents got a divorce, and not too long after that, he ended up moving away to a different state. And for a long time, I felt that he was never there for me when I needed him the most. The next, I had anger towards my mom, and we would always have these horrible arguments that ended me yelling at her that I hated her and I wished someone else was my mom. In some way, it was satisfying to myself to make her feel pain because I wanted everyone else to suffer just like I was on the inside. The next stage was bargaining, and I never really experienced this, but guilt closely relates. I felt that everything that went wrong in my life was completely my fault, and all the guilt that I was constantly feeling was tearing me apart in every single way. This stage really prevented me from being able to move on. Up until this point, I thought that guilt was the hardest thing to deal with, but it doesn't compare at all to depression. Junior year was the hardest year of my life because that's when I started battling with depression. I would have these night terrors that would wake me up in the middle of the night. I started to isolate myself. I didn't want to participate in anything. I became very irritable and agitated. I was very forgetful. I had a hard time concentrating, and I always feared that something bad was about to happen to me, which led me to be very paranoid. And no matter what I did, I could never get rid of my sadness. These were all signs of depression. Could you imagine constantly feeling every day that the world was crashing in on you? The pain became so unbearable that I started considering controlling my own destiny. This was constantly on my mind throughout the years, but at this point I was so desperate and hopeless that I was willing to do anything. I went from waking up with a smile on my face every single day to waking up unhappy that it made to live another day. One day, my mom ended up sitting me down, and she actually convinced me that it was time to go see a therapist. I had to go through a series of tests for the therapist to determine a plan in order to treat me. The test came back positive for severe anxiety and severe depression, which led her to the diagnosis of PTSD. I remember breaking down because I didn't realize how much my past really affected me. I thought, how could I have gone from this happy little girl to such a hateful, messed up 17-year-old? The therapist suggested that along with therapy, I go to the doctor and get medication that would help me from day to day. I went to counseling sessions once a week for a few months, and this time around I was very open to the help I needed in order to heal. And currently I've been on Zoloft for 9 months, and it has truly helped me significantly. As for the stage of acceptance, I don't think I've quite reached that point yet. It's a lot more than just being able to say, I'm okay. It comes along with me being able to accept the past for what it is and let go. But what I'm not going to do is let my past define who I am and who I will be in the future. Although I haven't reached that point yet, I'm truly grateful for how far I have made it. Hopefully one day I'll be able to say I have fully recovered from psychological trauma, but what I can say today is that I am no longer a victim, I am a survivor. Thank you.